The young woman behind the desk handed him a paper visitor badge, the cheap kind with the peel-off back, and asked him to please print his name clearly in the sign and book. He smiled, peeled it, and pressed it onto his jacket without a word of complaint. She had no idea that the name she'd just asked him to print was already there in the room with them, carved in letters a foot high into the marble wall directly behind her head. She'd walked past it every single day of her first week on the job and never once connected the engraving to the quiet man in the ball cap standing in front of her. Stay with me to the end of this one, because what that man did with that paper visitor badge and what he said about the two versions of his name in that lobby is something I haven't been able to stop thinking about since. His name was Nathaniel Brooks, and most of the world knew him simply as Nate. If you don't recognize the name, picture the kind of actor whose movies have been part of the background of your whole life. 30 years of films, the sort of face that turns heads in any airport on Earth. But the building he walked into that afternoon had nothing to do with movies. It was called the Brooks Center for the Arts, and it sat on a corner in the part of the city that doesn't usually get beautiful buildings. A bright, warm, generous place full of music rooms and dance studios and small theaters where any kid, regardless of whether their family had a single dollar to spare, could come after school and learn to sing, to act, to dance, to play, to make something. It was free. All of it. Every lesson, every instrument, every costume, every hour of a teacher's time. Free. To any kid who walked through the doors. And it was free because Nathaniel Brooks had paid for it, built it from the ground up, named it, funded it, and quietly kept funding it for the 15 years it had been open. He'd done it for a reason almost nobody knew. Because once, a long time ago, Nate had been one of those kids. Before the films, before the fame, Nate Brooks had been a 12-year-old with a bad home and worse prospects. The kind of kid the world had more or less already written off. He was angry and quiet and headed nowhere good, and he knew it. And then, almost by accident, he'd wandered into a free community theater program running out of a church basement. Because it was warm, and there was nowhere else to go. A tired old drama teacher there, a man whose name Nate would speak with reverence for the rest of his life, had handed him a script, watched him read, and said 8 words that changed the entire direction of a human life. He'd said, "You've got something, kid. Don't you dare quit." That was it. That was the whole miracle. A free program, a warm room, and one adult who saw something in a kid the rest of the world had stopped looking at. It pulled Nate off the path he was on. It gave him the thing he'd become famous for, and he never ever forgot that none of it, not one frame of one film, not one award, not $1, would have existed if that one room hadn't been there, free, for a kid who had nothing. So when he had the money, he built rooms like it. A lot of them under one roof with his name on the wall, not out of vanity, but because he wanted every kid who walked in to know that the place was permanent, that it wasn't going anywhere, that somebody had carved a promise into stone. The Brooks Center. And then, having built it, Nate did what he always did. He stepped back. He let the people who actually knew how to run it, run it. He almost never came in person. And when he did, he never announced it, never brought press, never made it about him. He'd told the director once that the day the center became about Nathaniel Brooks was the day it stopped being about the kids. So on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, with no warning to anyone, Nate Brooks put on a plain jacket and a ball cap, and he walked into his own building like any other stranger off the street. The young woman at the front desk was named Amara, and she was 19 years old and 4 days into the first real job of her life. Amara had grown up not far from the center. She'd actually been a kid in its programs years ago. which was part of why getting hired at the front desk meant so much to her. It felt like coming home and being trusted at the same time. But she was terrified of messing it up. New job, new responsibility, a long list of rules she'd been given on her first day, chief among them. Every single person who enters this building signs the visitor log and wears a badge. No exceptions. Security, child safety, the whole place was full of kids. You did not let an unbadged adult wander the halls, ever, no matter who they were. So when a man in a ball cap walked in that afternoon and headed toward the hallway, Amara did exactly what she'd been trained to do. She called out, politely but firmly, "Sir?" "Excuse me, sir. Everyone needs to sign in and wear a badge, please, center policy." The man stopped, turned, and came back to the desk with an easy, unbothered smile. "Of course," he said. "Sorry about that." She slid the sign-in book toward him and peeled a paper visitor badge off the roll. "If you could just print your name here, and the time, and who you're here to see." The man picked up the pen. And here's a detail Amara wouldn't understand until much later. He hesitated, just for a second, with the pen over the book, like the question of his own name was somehow complicated. Then he wrote, in plain block letters, N, Brooks, and the time, and in the box for who he was there to see, he wrote, simply, the kids. Amara, busy, distracted, 4 days in, did not read it closely. She handed him the paper badge. "Great, thank you so much. You can stick that anywhere visible. Enjoy your visit." "Thank you," he said. He peeled the badge, pressed it onto his jacket, and walked off down the hall. And directly behind Amara's head, carved into the marble wall in letters a foot high, the donor wall, the founder's wall, the wall she dusted every morning and had genuinely never read, were the words, "The Brooks Center for the Arts." Founded by Nathaniel Brooks. So that no child who has something is ever told to quit. The man wearing the paper visitor badge walked down the halls of the building that bore his name, and he was, for that golden hour, completely and joyfully nobody. This was the part Nate lived for. Nobody performing for him. Nobody on their best behavior. Just the place, breathing, exactly as it really was. He passed a music room where a dozen little kids were murdering a song on plastic recorders, beaming with pride. And he had to stop and press his hand to his mouth so they wouldn't see him laughing with joy. He passed a dance studio, a painting class, a room where teenagers were building a set out of plywood and arguing happily about the color. Every room was warm. Every room was full. Every room was free. And every room existed because a tired old man in a church basement had once told a written-off kid not to quit. And then, at the end of a quiet hallway, in a small practice room with the door half open, Nate found a boy sitting alone. The boy was maybe 12. He had a script in his hands, a single page crumpled from being held too tight. And he wasn't practicing. He was just staring at it. And there were tears he was furiously trying to blink away, and his backpack was already on his shoulders like he was about to walk out and not come back. Nate knew that exact posture. He'd worn it himself, in a church basement, 35 years before. He knocked gently on the doorframe. "This seat taken?" The boy startled, wiped his face fast, embarrassed. "No, I was just leaving anyway." "Yeah?" Nate came in slow, sat down on a plastic chair a respectful distance away, just another visitor with a paper badge. "Rough day?" The boy, his name was Isaiah, shrugged hard, the way kids do when the shrug is holding back a flood. "I'm just not good at it. The audition's Friday, and everybody else is way better, and my brother says acting's stupid anyway, and it's not gonna. People like me don't." He stopped, jaw tight. I'm gonna quit. It's dumb. Nate sat with that for a moment. And then he said, carefully, can I tell you something? When I was about your age, I had a page just like that one in my hands, in a room about this size, and I had my backpack on, exactly like you've got it on right now. And I had a brother who told me the same thing yours did. He nodded at the script. Read me a little, just a little. I won't tell anybody if it's bad. Isaiah looked at him, this stranger, this nobody with a peel-off badge, and for some reason he couldn't name, he uncrumpled the page. And he read. Quietly at first, then less quietly, and he was good. He was really, really good. In the raw, unpolished way that makes the back of your neck prickle. The way you can't teach. When he finished, Nate didn't clap, didn't gush, didn't do any of the fake things grown-ups do. He just leaned forward and said 8 words. The same 8 words. The ones from the church basement. The ones that built a life. And then a building. You've got something, kid. Don't you dare quit. Isaiah stared at him. Something shifted in the boy's face. That fragile, dangerous, beautiful moment when a kid decides, against all the evidence of their short, hard life, to believe in themselves for one more day. You really think? He whispered. I don't think, Nate said. I know. I've seen a lot of people read a lot of pages. Don't quit. Promise me. Okay, Isaiah breathed. Okay, I promise. And he took his backpack off his shoulders and set it down, and he turned back to the page, and the stranger with the paper badge slipped quietly out of the room so the boy could practice. It was in the main hallway, on his way back toward the front, that Nate ran into the one person in the building who knew his face. Her name was Ruth, and she'd been the center's director since the day it opened. She was coming around a corner with a stack of folders, and she looked up, and she saw a man in a ball cap with a paper visitor badge stuck to his jacket, and the folders very nearly hit the floor. Nate? She said, her voice cracking. Nathaniel Brooks. Is that? What are you? And then she saw the badge on his chest, the cheap peel-off visitor sticker, and she understood what had happened, and her hand flew to her mouth. Oh no, they gave you at the front desk, did they give you a... Ruth, Nate said warmly. It's good to see you. By then they drifted back toward the lobby, and Amara, at the front desk, looked up at the sound of the director's voice, saw her boss, nearly in tears, saw her addressing the man in the ball cap by name, and slowly turned her head and looked, for what might have been the very first time, at the wall behind her own desk. The Brooks Center for the Arts, founded by Nathaniel Brooks. She looked at the marble. She looked at the man. She looked down at the sign in book, at the plain block letters. N. Brooks, here to see. The kids. The color drained out of her face. Oh my God, she whispered. Oh my God, sir, I made you sign in. I gave you a paper visitor badge. I'm so sorry I didn't. Your name is right. It's right there. I'm so... And Nate Brooks held up a hand, gently, to stop her. And then he did something that none of them expected. He reached up to the paper badge on his jacket, and instead of peeling it off, he pressed it down more firmly, smoothing it flat, like he was making sure it would stay. Don't you dare apologize, he said to Amara, and there was no anger in it at all, only something close to wonder. You did everything exactly right. Every person who enters this building signs in. Every person wears a badge. No exceptions, no matter who they think they are. Do you know how many places would have let a man in a ball cap just wander past 100 children because something about him seemed important? He shook his head. You kept those kids safe, and you treated me like everyone else, which is exactly how I should be treated. You didn't fail. You're the best thing I've seen at that desk in 15 years. Amara's eyes filled. "But your name's on the wall," she said helplessly. "And I gave you a paper one." And here is the thing he said. The thing I told you about at the very beginning. Nate looked at the foot-high letters carved in marble behind the desk, and then he looked down at the cheap peel-off badge on his own chest, and he said, quietly, "You want to know the truth? That name up there on the wall, that's not really mine. That's just stone. I put it there so the kids would know this place is permanent, that it's not going anywhere. But this," he tapped the paper badge, "this one's the honest one. Because I am a visitor here. This isn't my building. It belongs to them. The kid in the practice room down the hall who almost quit 10 minutes ago, it's his. I just paid for the roof." He smiled at her. "The day I start thinking the name in the marble means more than the name on the paper badge is the day I've forgotten the whole point of building it. So no, I'm not taking it off. I'm keeping it. It's the most honest thing anyone's given me in years." He kept it, too. Ruth told the story for years afterward. How Nathaniel Brooks, one of the most famous men alive, walked out of the center that day, still wearing a peel-off paper visitor badge over his heart. And how he later had that very badge framed and hung it in his home, where the awards were, where anyone might have expected the gold statues to be the centerpiece. People would ask him what it was. He'd just smile and say it was the truest thing he owned. What he did for Isaiah, the boy in the practice room, he did the quiet way, of course. The kid never got paraded out for a photo. But somewhere down the line, when Isaiah found out, and he did find out, that the stranger with the paper badge who told him not to quit had been the man whose name was on the wall, the man who'd built the entire place, he understood something that most of us spend our whole lives never quite learning. He understood that the person who changed his life hadn't done it from up on the wall, in foot-high letters, as a famous, important man. He'd done it sitting in a plastic chair, as a nobody, with a cheap badge on his chest, eye to eye, the way the old man in the church basement had once done it for a written-off kid named Nate. And Isaiah did not quit. That part I'll let you imagine. But I think you already know. I think about this story more than I expected to. And not because a famous man got handed the wrong badge. The mix-up is just the hook. The thing underneath it is the question of which name is the real one. Because we all have two names in a way. There's the one we want carved in marble, the impressive one, the one we hope people read, the version of ourselves we'd like to be famous for. And then there's the paper one. The everyday one, who we actually are when we're just a visitor, when nobody's performing for us, when we're sitting in a plastic chair next to a scared kid with nothing to gain. And the hard, beautiful truth that Nate understood is that the paper one is the true one. The marble is just stone. What you are is how you treat the people who have no idea your name is on any wall at all. A 19-year-old at a front desk treated a legend like an ordinary person, and it turned out that was the highest compliment she could possibly have paid him, because being treated like an ordinary person was the only thing he'd ever actually wanted. And a famous man chose a paper badge over a marble engraving because he understood that being a visitor in a place built for kids was a greater thing than being its name. So here's what I'll leave you with. Somewhere this week, you're going to be tempted to lead with your marble name, your title, your importance, the impressive version of you. And somewhere else, quieter, you'll get the chance to just be a visitor, to sit in the plastic chair, to tell a scared kid or a tired stranger or someone the world's written off that they've got something and they shouldn't quit. Choose the paper badge. It's the honest one. It's the one that's actually you. If this story moved you, leave one word in the comments. Visitor. Just so I know you made it to the end and so I know there are still people out there who understand which name is the real one. And if you believe the best people are the ones who'd rather wear the paper badge than point at the marble, then subscribe, because those are the only people we make stories about on this channel. Thank you for being here. I'll see you in the next one.